Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Trauma Overhaul Podcast. As many of you know, we used to be called the Time to Unpack Talk Show, but we're coming back in podcast format just to offer a bit of a different experience so that we can connect with you even on a greater level. And for those of you who might be unaware, my name is Tiffany Singleton, and I will be your host for the Trauma Overhaul Podcast. And I have some exciting news. This season, I will have with me a co-host. Her name is Miss Aaliyah Simon, and I will let her say hello to you.
Hello, everyone. My name again is Aaliyah Simon, and I am so excited to be here as a co-host with Tiffany. So let's flow.
All right. And so we're going to get into some conversation. What we're going to be talking about today is trauma and triggers. We know that trauma is a big buzzword right now in social media since COVID-19, since the pandemic. Everybody is talking about trauma and triggers. It's like a great buzzword that's going on right now. So we're going to dive into that just a little bit to make sure, one, that we're pretty spot on with what exactly is trauma. Are we labeling things appropriately as trauma? And are we really triggered when we say that we're being triggered? Right? Okay. We're going to start out by talking about what is a trauma. And Aaliyah, I know you've had great experience in this field as well. So enlighten the audience on what exactly is trauma.
So, trauma is something that happens within us due to an experience or event that went beyond our capacity to deal with, to cope with. That's trauma. And that can be anything. That can be a dog bite. That can be a car accident, divorce of parents. That can be, of course, we know the big T's, the child maltreatment, some type of physical abuse, some type of domestic violence. But it goes beyond just those things. Like I said, it's just something that goes beyond our ability to cope with.
Mhm. Okay. And I think that's very important that you pointed out that there are different types of traumas. Because for me, growing up, it's like I always thought that PTSD, which by the way is post traumatic stress disorder, just for the sake of definition and knowing what that stands for, I used to always think it was connected to going to war or
Right.
somebody that was in the military
Right.
or somebody that went through a horrible sexual experience such as rape. But I didn't realize until later on in life that it could be any type of distressing event could
Oh,
actually
yes.
cause PTSD.
Oh, yes. I remember when I first came down here to go to college, leaving. I'm originally from Newark, New Jersey. So I came down here to go to college and I brought me with me, thinking I can reinvent myself
All right.
almost. But I brought myself with me and
Mhm.
all of those traumatic experiences that I had growing up.
Mhm.
And so I remember a therapist saying to me, "Hey, you have PTSD." And I'm like, I've never been to war.
Right.
So I didn't realize that you can actually have it until
Mhm.
that moment in time. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
And also, as interesting as that is, being able to point out the fact that not everyone develops PTSD,
Right.
right? And so that depends on certain factors in our lives. For example, let's say that you have two people, one got bit by a bulldog, one got bit by a Doberman. One person developed PTSD while the other person is totally fine, right? So the difference could be something as simple as maybe nobody was home when person A got bit,
Yes.
and therefore they felt like it was so traumatic. I had to fight for my life. Nobody was there to support me. I was totally trying to survive. Whereas person B may have had a dad or a mother there that ran out and was actually able to rescue them from the attack. And so just those factors alone can cause one person to develop PTSD and the other person to be totally normal or fine moving forward.
Yes, I agree. I remember talking to someone about childhood stuff
Mhm.
and how sometimes it really depends on who was present
That's correct.
and whether you were made to feel shame of certain things, whether you were supported,
Mhm.
because sometimes we'll internalize a false belief about what just happened. Just
That's
like you said, a false belief about what
mhm,
just happened.
that's right.
And then if it's reinforced, then it becomes what? A core belief.
That's right.
And that core belief can lead you to a life of patterns that you're
Mm,
very unaware of,
mhm,
but it leaves you in a place where you're acting out from
mm,
that lens.
right. Okay. And with the development of PTSD is something now that we have stored information in our bodies as far as a traumatic experience, right?
Mhm.
When we say that, we're saying almost like our body has served as a recorder of the
Yes.
information. So now it's like we have triggers, which is also now the big
The big
buzzword,
buzzword.
said something triggered me. So, what exactly does that mean when something is triggering us? That means something is eliciting a emotional response
Right.
in a negative way because now our body is like, "Oh, there's that thing again. Oh, I'm in danger. I'm in danger."
Right.
Right? Now we have to be aware of what those triggers are,
Right.
right? Let's talk about, is everybody triggered? Can everybody be triggered? Is it possible?
No, everybody
Okay.
is not triggered.
Okay. All right.
And a lot of times when you are triggered, you don't even know it. Your
Mhm.
body is what's feeling it. You're not thinking about it.
Right.
It is something because the body keeps score.
Mhm.
It is something that your body reacts to in any given situation.
Mhm.
And it takes you back
Mhm.
to that experience, that traumatic experience. It takes you back there. It's usually through your senses, your
Mm.
taste, smell, what you see, what you hear.
Yes.
Those are the things that might trigger you. Is usually not just because somebody got under your skin and now you're feeling triggered.
Right. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
usually not that type of thing. And I think we misuse that word a lot
Yes.
nowadays.
That's right. Mhm. And so with a trigger, so comes what we refer to as emotional dysregulation. That's just a big term for saying that now I cannot control my emotions
Yes.
when this thing comes into my environment, right?
Mhm.
I think it was great that you pointed out that the triggers come via our senses.
Mhm.
And what is so powerful in that, the sense of smell.
Yes.
Most people don't realize even the sense of smell can bring back a memory
Yes.
more stronger than almost any of the other senses.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So being able to recognize in those moments what is actually a trigger for me.
Right.
Yeah, what's a trigger for me? When we talk about emotional dysregulation, so that might lead to moments of outbursts. It might lead to anger. It might lead to feeling rejected or
Yes.
shame. All of these things actually surface when we're triggered,
Yeah.
which also then leads us into what we know as the trauma response.
Yes.
Okay. So trauma responses.
Trauma response may be you're feeling a sense of abandonment
Mhm,
or rejection just because
mhm,
someone said, "No, I can't do that today."
mhm.
Or maybe somebody left you on red, right? And you
Ooh.
feel like, "Oh my gosh, like they're rejecting me," when really they looked at your message and
Yeah.
meant to
Yes, right.
respond, but they went about their business and
Mhm,
just completely forgot because that
mhm,
happens. So we don't
mhm,
usually give someone the benefit of the doubt. We go straight into that
mhm,
trauma response of, I'm being rejected. Oh my
mm,
gosh, do you get that feeling? And so it kept me out of a lot of relationships. It kept
mhm,
me from really diving into, friendships the way I should. It
mm.
played out in my marriage. Thank God I
Wow.
have such a great husband, but it played out in so many arenas,
Mm.
including the workplace,
Wow. Yeah.
everywhere. It
Mhm.
shows up in places where for a long time I didn't really know what that was.
Right.
But yeah,
Mm,
it
mm.
happens.
Yeah. So triggers, they don't always have to be a bad thing
No.
because triggers are also present to alarm us of
Mhm.
certain situations. But and most times than not, it takes the negative approach though, right?
Mhm.
And triggers are it's reminders of our unhealed wounds.
Yes.
And so I love the example you just gave. Let's walk into that a little more. Let's say that as a child, if we have abandonment wounds or we felt like our caregivers, our parents, did not provide the necessary care or emotional needs weren't taken care of. Any of those sorts of scenarios can lead to feelings of abandonment,
Right.
which can translate into our adult life
Yes.
and our relationships, right?
Mhm.
And what that looks like for the person is it can be small things, just like you just pointed out. If somebody did not answer a text or they did not call you back, or just something simple, then maybe they made a promise to take you somewhere and it slipped their mind or they missed
Right.
the schedule. So now we're back into the feelings of abandonment. And now we're holding that person
Mhm.
accountable for what we've now experienced, almost like we're going back
Yes.
to that same mindset.
Yes.
Mm.
Oh, yes. And then you have those outbursts,
Yes,
that anger,
yes,
that shortness,
yes.
that and then what it does to you physically,
Mhm,
like the rapid heart rate,
mhm.
the sweaty hands,
Yeah,
the feeling of, I want to throw up,
yeah.
maybe.
Mhm,
So it plays out in your body. So paying attention to that. I used to always say, I'm grateful for my emotions now because my emotions is my alarm clock.
mhm.
It tells me a thought that I'm having.
Mm.
If I really sit with that emotion
That's right.
or that feeling, I'm like, okay, why am I feeling this way?
Mm,
So it is my compass to get to what is my frame of thinking right now? What
mm,
am I believing right now?
mhm.
So it's helpful for me to feel that emotion. And then I'm like, oh, let's dig.
Right.
What is my beliefs about this moment in time? So it's
Mm,
helpful to actually sit in those feelings because it will guide you.
right. Yeah. And that's the way, because normally people say, okay, well, how do I deal with that? The triggers might not ever go away.
Mhm.
So I think it's important that we learn one, how to deal with them, how to navigate that if we cannot, in fact, avoid them.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, that was I mean, when you said it, I was like, "Yay, yes," because I mean, we think that healing from from traumatic events is this thing where it just goes away.
Mhm.
No, what happens is you now have it's now time for you to make a different decision
Mm,
because you're aware of your traumatic experience. You're aware of your triggers. So now you get to pause
that's right.
and make a different
Mhm.
decision from when you once had those triggers and you acted automatically.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And so that's key what you said, being able to identify them, first of
Yes.
all. Do
Yes.
we even know? Most people, like you said, is so automatic, you don't even realize.
Mhm.
And so, what we typically do in therapy is we encourage clients to identify patterns.
Right.
Patterns are
Yes.
key in a lot of ways of healing, right?
Hmm.
And so, you might not realize until you say, oh, every time I hear that sound, my body does this,
Yes.
right? Every time I walk into a place and I smell that cinnamon,
Hmm. Hmm.
wow, I never
Yeah.
realized
Yep.
it, right?
Yep.
And so that's the beauty of identification,
Yes.
because now we can develop the next steps that,
Mhm.
okay, this is what I can learn to do when I'm
Right.
confronted with that trigger.
Oh yes. Oh yes. I love that. And always remember, like you said earlier, triggers are not always bad.
No.
Because like
Mhm,
there's a specific song
mhm,
that comes on
mhm.
this Christmas,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Whenever I hear that song, I don't know what memory that's attached to.
Wow.
I have no idea, but I
Mhm.
know that when I hear that song, something good happened while that song was playing because I get all the feels from that song. Like I
Mm,
don't feel like it's Christmas until I hear that song. I don't
wow.
feel like it's just I don't know what it is. I just hear that song and it's connected to something happy.
Wow.
Yeah. So it
Mhm,
doesn't always have to be something bad. And those are
mhm.
things you want to keep.
Right.
Those are those good triggers that you want to keep. But
Mm.
throwing away, not throwing away, but learning how to deal with the other ones is definitely something that is a personal journey for me as well. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And since we're differentiating between what's could be the positive thing about a
Hmm.
trigger versus the negative, I think we also need to point out that since they are used as indicators
Hmm.
of danger, possibly. So we don't want to relay the message that, or we're not trying to say that they might not represent a true sign of danger
Right.
at times. But so you have to kind of look at your evidence, look at your facts
Mhm.
to know when in fact you are in real
Real danger.
danger.
Yeah.
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 So just wanted to point that out.
I agree. I
Mhm.
agree. Yeah.
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 Okay. All right. So let's talk about some ways. So let's say that we're really, really triggered to the point where, we cannot even really function. Almost like for some people, it may shut you completely down. It may do something to breathing. Like you said, you might have the outburst. So let's talk about some tips or some things that we can do to help manage those triggers. And just to outline some of those, just once we identify what it is, just being able to stop in that moment and pause. Like you said, being able to pause and say, okay, I was triggered. Something simple is just saying, I was triggered.
Mhm.
And in this moment, that trigger made me feel X, Y, and Z. This is what I'm feeling right now. And then that pausing allows us to evaluate and say, I am really in a safe space at
Yeah.
the moment. It
Mhm.
is February the 19th, 2024, and I am sitting in a quiet office, and there is absolutely no danger present.
Right.
I am safe.
I am safe.
And as simple as that sounds, it really works in those moments.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. And I also believe in being proactive.
Mhm.
Don't wait until you're triggered.
Mhm.
Learn how to breathe
Yes.
prior to.
Mhm.
Like one of the things that I do and still do to this day is before I turn off the shower,
Mhm.
I turn on the cold water.
Mm.
And of course, we know that helps with the vagus nerve.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
with that, it gives you a sense of well being. It
Mm.
works on your abdominal organs,
Mhm.
right? To bring you to a place of, again, well being.
Right.
So I use that as a proactive way to begin my day
Mm.
by calming my body already. And also what it has helped me with, of
Mhm.
course, when the cold shower come on, you want to do what? Jump
Jump
out.
out, right.
Right. So it allows me,
Mhm.
is teaching me
Mhm.
I can stay in uncomfortable places,
I like that. I
and
like that.
still not
Mhm.
react by running or
Mhm.
freezing or,
Yes.
whatever.
You're right.
So
Mhm.
it's really been helpful
Mhm.
in regulating my body.
That's good.
It's
Mhm.
that proactive thing before I even start my day.
Mhm.
That's what I'm doing.
Yes.
I'm meditating, sitting still with myself,
Mm.
enjoying, being with myself and learning that breathing technique. So those
Mm.
are some proactive things that I started to do. So now when things I do get triggered, it's
Right.
like I already know how to stop for a moment because I've been
Mm.
practicing how to pause for a moment.
Right.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
just kind of learning how to be proactive in it.
That's good. That's good. And that's really key because now, with that being coupled with being able to identify the trigger when it comes,
Mhm.
right, that should work.
Yeah,
Great. Mhm.
yeah, it
Yeah.
helps me.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I'm just
Look,
giving what's
but
helping me.
right. Yeah.
It's definitely working good for me. Cause
That's
I
it.
tell you.
That's it. But the biggest, I think, just the biggest thing is not overlooking it,
Mhm.
right? And just being able to acknowledge triggers and trauma and not living life with it buried
Right.
and covered up. I think it's okay, or not think, I know it's okay to be able to search for healing or to do that self exploration so that we can walk in freedom.
Yes.
Yes, being able to address those things that have probably held us bound for
Come
years,
on now.
for
For
years,
years.
right?
For years.
But there is a way out. And that is the whole point of us creating this podcast so that we can help you navigate. Let's find ways that we can get out.
Right.
Get out.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we hope that you have found some of this conversation, if not all of it, very useful. And any parting thoughts you would like to leave the audience with, Alia?
Of course.
Okay.
No. No, just that trauma is very real. We know that.
Mhm.
And your feelings are validated in it. That, that we all have our stories.
Mhm.
But the thing is, it's possible to walk through this life and this healing journey,
Mhm.
because you never really get into the other side. You're
Correct.
not,
Yeah.
but you
Mhm.
can walk whole
Mhm.
in this.
I
You
love
can
that.
become aware of your triggers, of your traumas, and how they show up in your life. And
Mhm.
you can actually take your power back
That's right.
from those traumatic experiences.
That's good.
And so that's the main reason why we're here, is because we're telling you
Mhm.
that, hey, this trauma overhaul, we're going to do this because it's time for you to take your power back,
That's
right?
right. That's right. That's it. And I know we said we were closing, but you just prompted another thing. I just thought about, suppose you are in a situation where somebody is intentionally being a trigger for you.
Ooh. Ooh.
Because it might not be a thing.
Yeah.
It might be a person,
Oh, yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah. So even being able to identify that as a trigger, and how do we navigate that? Because in those cases, if we are living in the house with someone that serves as the trigger, what does that look like in navigating that? What
Mm.
can we do to respond to that? Because that's a real thing for some
Right.
people. And so in most cases, you can do so. People, they remember patterns.
Mhm.
People knows what triggers us in most cases,
Yeah.
and they have remembered responses. They know our response.
Right.
So what we have to do to even navigate that, or to come out of that situation, is to learn ways not to respond the same. What am I saying? Learn to respond differently,
Differently. Yeah.
but in a healthy way, so it no longer triggers their response, so
Yeah.
that they will keep trying to trigger you.
Right. But
Mhm.
see, this is the thing though.
Mhm.
What we have to learn about trauma and
Mhm.
triggers
Yeah,
is that that's an inside job,
that's right. Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Regardless of what somebody else does
That's
or
right.
does not do,
Mhm.
it is our response that's most important.
That's
And
right.
I think that we sometimes put it on other people.
Mhm.
Because guess what?
Mhm.
There are certain things that you can say to me that's not going to bother me. No, why? Because it's not a thing that I have a problem with.
Right.
While there are some other things.
Mhm.
So if it is bothering you,
That's right.
right? You
Mhm.
have to figure out, why is this bothering
Why
me?
is it? Mhm.
How is it that I'm
Mhm.
allowing this to happen
Mhm.
or make me feel like this?
Right.
It's not them.
Mhm.
It's all me.
That's right.
And I'm going to take accountability, because with accountability, there's a freedom in that.
There you
So
go.
that's saying to me, if
Mhm.
I take accountability for my own triggers,
Mhm.
my own trauma,
That's
that
it.
says to me, then I have the power
The
to
power.
change that.
That's it. That's
And
it.
nobody else has that but me.
That's it. That's it.
So,
That's it. All right. So what is the trigger? Right? Why does this trigger me?
exactly.
Right? What is my reaction to the trigger? Right?
Mhm.
And what do I need to remind myself of, so that I can stay in control of my emotion?
Right.
So those are a few questions that, if you find yourself in that situation, stop. And maybe if you have to write it down or journal it,
Mhm.
answer those questions, so that you can figure out how to respond to the trigger.
All right now.
All right. We're going to stop there for this episode. Next, we're going to be talking about boundaries.
Ooh.
Boundaries. So stay tuned for the next episode.